Okay, I'm continuing with the newspaper quilt. This is the Brother LX3014 and the flower foot and black fabric, and I want to show you I'm doing zigzag, just a straight zigzag circle with this flower foot. I figured out what I'm going to do with this quilt. I'm going to be putting elements in the middle, and then I'm going to be going around the border of each square with the Singer zigzagger and the different zigzag patterns. And I'm using the Brother in the interim just to show you on a modern machine the flower foot. And I've already done a couple of squares. I don't know if this will glow already. Look at that. And that's just from the sewing light. So the thread itself, it works. It's fine. But I want to get to the Singer automatic zigzagger, and I want to use the different stitch patterns that are available for that. Now, I could use this machine. This is a low shank machine, and if I leave this machine on straight stitch and attach the zigzagger for the pattern cams, I can do that on this machine. That's what I mentioned a bit in the first video on the newspaper quilt. When you use either the Brother, a modern zigzag machine, or the 237 by Singer, if you attach the automatic zigzagger to get the pattern cams, you have to make sure the machine is on straight stitch. So I just wanted to do some of these squares with the Brother. I had the tension on one. I had to really lighten the tension on this to do this, but it makes pretty circles, and like I said, the directions with the flower foot does tell you how to make different design flowers. So those that I did on the Spartan that are a plain circle are going to be the moon, and that'll be the top row, and I may fill those in, and then under that will be circles of flowers. So the quilt is starting to fall together in my thinking as I work on it. Now, this is the adjustment screw on the flower foot. If I loosen that and turn the plate, these marks right here, this is a minus, that's a plus. That's the biggest size. I have it all the way, this is the mark, and I have it lined up here, which is the biggest size. But I could leave it right there, loosen that screw, leave everything the way it is, loosen the screw, move this to the lower mark, and I'd be making a design inside the circle. So there is a lot you can do with these, and it comes under machine embroidery, but I'm going to be switching to the 237, and I'll tell you why. I love the Brother machines. They're wonderful machines. My 237 has one advantage. It can take the Bishop hand crank. So if the motor should go, or I'm in a power outage or something, I can put that hand crank on there and I can keep working without power. So that's one advantage over the Brother. The other advantage is the oiling of the Brother. You have to use a screwdriver to take this off, and then you can only really oil this section, whereas the 237 I can oil. I take the top off. I can oil anything I want. So here's, this is going to be a second video on a little bit more progress on the newspaper quilt. Okay, now just as a little added bonus, this is the Singer 237. I have the flower foot on here, And with the flower foot, you need the zigzag. This is why this is just a little bit better than the Spartan. I go back and forth all the time on both of them are very good machines. But the 237 has straight stitch zigzag, excuse me, 3 needle positions, and fine stitching for embroidery. It also can take what I call the Bishop hand crank, if you want to take the motor off, and it's one of the only Singer zigzag machines that can be treadled. And it fits in my Singer treadle that I don't have set up right now. I have the white treadle set up. So what I'm going to do, this is a previously quilted rag square, and I'm just going to see how the flower foot does on a traditional quilt square. Now this is louder on this machine. It looks like I have to tighten the tension a little bit. That clicking is when this bar over here moves. But I think it's probably... Let's just watch this go up. See how that is fitting right there in the needle clamp, and the foot actually had it over here, so I think that's sliding off of there every time. I have it tight enough, so that might just be something that happens with different machines. So basically it did fine, except I need to adjust the tension, I think, and we don't want the bunching. But basically it did fine. Normally when you're doing any kind of embroidery, you would have the fabric in a hoop. But this is a way to check the tension, make sure your bobbin loads correctly. There goes my camera again. So the flower foot, when I looked at it yesterday, a new one, it's like $7.99. And so far I've had it on the Spartan straight stitch machine, the Brother zigzag, and now a vintage 237 zigzag. So I don't know, see now when I lift it up, see how the arm is over there? And then, let's see when it clips off of there, or why it did that. I'm pretty sure that was the noise, and it shouldn't be doing that. That clicking noise is normal. So double check everything if that happens with you on a vintage machine. Now here's something I want to point out. I did a couple of little flowers with the flower feet, and I'm working on adjusting the tension. When this is sitting on there, it is this arm that when on this particular machine, the needle moves side to side with the zigzag, that bar is sliding off of there, and in just a few minutes it loosened not only the needle clamp, but loosened the screw that holds the foot on there. So you can get used to the noise, except they're not supposed to sound like that. So here's the old-fashioned way of making circular flower shapes with simply not using a flower foot and only using a zigzag machine. So I've got the original zigzag foot back on there. And there you go. So you can skip the flower foot if you want. That's actually much nicer looking with this particular machine. The flower foot worked very well on both the Spartan and the Brother. But on this particular machine, and I've often said the 237 has the best zigzag stitch, I still have to tighten the tension a little bit. But even if I leave the bobbin tension a little loose like that, that's the same effect as the flower foot and quilting. Now you can design a whole page with just zigzag if you want. So this is actually a regular zigzag machine is actually in some ways better than a flower foot. A flower foot is fast, consistent, a nice little gadget. But if you look at this in particular, this one, this is exactly what you're trying to accomplish with that. The only difference is, especially with an electric machine, you take care in your shaping, how fast you go around, how long the stitch is, how big the stitch is. It lets you be a little bit more creative with a regular zigzag stitch over needing a foot. And then, of course, this is what leads to the handy stitch. Even though it's not a zigzag stitch, a handy stitch is very simple to just go in random shapes and random quilting. So it depends on your overall goal with the quilt and the effect that you want with the quilt. But now you see you can use vintage machines, modern machines, a flower foot attachment, or a regular zigzag. And of course, or the handy stitch. The handy stitch is a chain stitcher, and a lot of people don't like them because if you don't have the final thread coming through the last loop when you end a seam, it'll come undone. But it makes a very nice chain stitch. And it doesn't have, like, you can't change the stitch length. You can't really change anything. But if that's all you have, they're about $15 to $20. As long as you can get through the fabric with it, which they will go through 4 layers. With the newspaper quilt, you would end up piecing the squares together by hand, because I don't think they'll go through 8 layers. But this is several ways to accomplish the same thing. Because I wanted to, I was working with the 237, and I don't want to use the flower foot on there, simply because of the way it hits the needle clamp. And so I was deciding, okay, which machine am I really going to do this with? And the way that I have some of the squares started already, I could make a top and a bottom row, and then the middle 8 rows could just be random quilting, because the articles in this case are blah 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 blah. But just to see if a Model 20 would go through 4 layers of fabric. This is a cotton, but it's a slightly lighter weight cotton than the other squares. And I just wanted to see if it would work. Now, a hand crank, I was thinking, you know, this is a whole newspaper thing. Both my father and grandfather had the craft, the skill. They had a trade. They were both compositors at newspapers. They were people that took tiny, 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 tiny metal letters and lined them up in a row correctly to print the paper. So a hand crank brings in the presses. When I was a child, we had presses in the basement that my father ran by hand. Not with a hand crank, with a foot pedal. So anything done by hand without a machine, without a motor, goes more with the theme of the quilt. So here we are. I was saying here we are with the Model 20 stitches, and I had to fix the camera for a moment. I'm in better light. That was the Model 20 from the 1920s, the antique one, with a vintage thread and not the glow-in-the-dark thread. But 4 layers beautifully. And as I was saying, the hand crank aspect of this is just wonderful to go with the theme of the quilt. And I can make random shapes like this, and gee, that's an article or something in a newspaper. So I think what I'm going to be doing is probably using the Model 20 to go through 4 layers, get all of the squares, at least one element on them, either a center or something like this, and then consider going to the Spartan or my 1588 or maybe the 1591 and doing the vintage stitch cam patterns around the edges.